Outside is the first in a series of records that should go up to the end of the century. When did you first decide to do this project? Are you going to do it right through the end, do you think?
We started off just going to make an album, but it just turned into this kind of musical diary as we were sort of improvising in the studio, and we felt it might not be a bad idea to capture each year or 18 months as it goes past. But I start the next one with Brian in September, October. But before that, I'm taking my present band into the studio at the end of July to do a more regular kind of album. Just on the, I think the band are playing so well at the moment that I want to go in with the energy that we've got at the moment with some brand new material.
What are the differences going to be between what you've been doing and what the new record will be like?
The band record, so-called, I mean, it hasn't got any kind of title yet, will be much more of a high energy album. Sort of really reflecting on the kind of energy of the stage show that we're doing.
We should talk a little bit about the set that you're doing, because I've looked through the set list. It's an interesting set list, particularly in terms of mixing the old and the new material. When we're talking about Outside, which is very much of a record that you can listen to in its entirety, how did you go about putting the set together? Running like Outside into Aladdin Sane, for instance?
Well, we found that the songs on the Outside album are pretty good as autonomous pieces. They do stand up much on their own. I think they've got their own strengths individually. And I just chose songs that I knew could be rearranged often in a style that would match very comfortably what we're doing with Outside. So I took things as diverse as Tin Machine songs, Baby Universal, Aladdin Sane. I used Aladdin Sane actually because Mike Garson, our pianist, was the last time he actually played that was 1974 together. So it's 22 years since we've done that one. And I've got Gail Ann Dorsey singing on it as well, which is great. She's a wonderful singer. That's the bass player.
She's a great bass player too.
She's fabulous. And then we put more unusual things in that I wrote with or for other people, like the Under Pressure song with Gail, for the one I did with Freddie Mercury. Yeah. All the Young Dudes that I wrote for Mott the Hoople. And Iggy's Last for Life, which I wrote with him around 76, something like that. So it's pretty diverse kind of stuff, but not really it's not what you would call a big hit show.
Let's talk a little bit about Iggy. I was talking with him just now about the kind of symbiotic relationship that you certainly seem to have had over the years, particularly when you were in Berlin. I mean, that set of records that came out of yours and of his, it was obviously you were influencing him, he was influencing you. When you look back at that side, do you see it that time the same way?
I find it, I think for both of us it was very important in terms of how we approached the studio. I think a lot of things changed there. Partially with what I wanted to do as a producer, it allowed me, working with Jim, to give full scope to the kind of sound that I wanted to try and find. And working on The Idiot really gave me a very good scape. And then going on to working with Brian modified it and added his own particular ingredients. And also one thing that must never be forgotten, I think, in all that period, especially on the albums I did with Brian Eno, is the strengths and actual technical ability of Tony Visconti, who actually did produce those albums, Low, Heroes and Lodgers. And I think that what Tony did with the drum sound on those three albums probably changed the entire way that drums were ever worked with again in the studio. I mean, he made the drums sound the most bizarre that had been sound up until that date, I think.
Was it a bizarre time for you living and working in Berlin?
It was quite hard work because I was doing a lot of cleaning up, a bit of house cleaning, so I think there was a lot of ups and downs, you know, in sort of day-to-day life. And we lived very low-profile kind of life over there, you know. It was very easy to just be very much yourself in Berlin. I found it a really easygoing city. I like that a lot about it.
I mean, he said, and you've worked with him in his band, in Iggy's band before. Yeah. You're on the TVI Live album as such. But he said you've never actually sung together on a show. Why is that?
Just never did. I don't know. I mean, I've not sung with that many people, really. Mick, Tina, Mark Bolan I sang with. Bing. I think that's about it. I can't remember that. I've not done it that many times, really.
I was trying to imagine what it would be like, because obviously it works on record, the two of you, but I'm not sure I can imagine that working on stage.
I don't know. We haven't really ever done vocals together. I mean, I think we treat each other as very separate entities. I think that's probably why the strengths of our recording work together became so apparent, is that what one person lacked, the other one fulfilled, and vice versa. And I think that's why those few albums, right through Blah Blah Blah, I've actually got a very soft spot for Blah Blah Blah. I think it's a terrific album, one of his best. I would imagine it'll be reevaluated in a year or two, as cycles go. But there's a lot of it. The track itself, Blah Blah Blah, I thought was really quite prescient. I mean, it has a lot of sampling, a lot of looping and samples on it. And for the time it was made, it was really it was almost 10 years ago. It was really ahead of the game.
You're very good at collaborations. If we talk about the work you've been doing recently with Brian Eno, I mean, when he came to work on this record, was it light working with him in Berlin, or was it a very different approach this time?
Almost immediately we fell back into the ways that we usually work, which is just pure throwing everything we can think of, however bizarre the idea is, we throw it into the soup, so to speak. It was like we'd never stop working together. I mean, it was just immediate.
With the Heart's Filthy Less as an example, would that be an example of the way that you work in terms of cutting up lyrics? Because I mean, the lyric itself, the heart, you don't think of in terms of lessons, because one is like feeling and one is more cerebral.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. Often a hard and soft piece of lyric material will go into the same song. We cut in between the two, or sometimes three, or sometimes five different pieces of information. When Brian and I start working again on the next Nathan Adler Diaries album, it's just going to be myself and Brian. But just the two of us are going to probably do the rest of the albums for this particular series.
There was a story that appeared in print as well about Nathan Adler. Is that something that you'll be continuing?
Well, that was all part of the embryonic formation of this thing. I was actually commissioned to write that for a British magazine, and they wanted me to do a diary of myself and what I've been doing for the last 7 days, and I thought that was kind of boring. So I just started gathering lots of the things that Brian and I had been writing and talking about, and kind of wrote up this fictitious diary piece, which just sparked our interest into continuing it, Yeah, I'd imagine I would. I don't know. I liked a clue.
I liked Outside very much. I look forward to the albums that will follow. Thanks very much, David.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Nice weather, turned out
Beautiful
nice.
weather, lovely atmosphere.
Look at that
yeah,
sky.
Super
Casper
place.
David
Yeah.